I'm back here, sadly to say, Jim Supica, wrapping up this special series of Curator's Corners where you took a trip out to Raton, New Mexico, to the Whittington Center, and man, oh man, came back with some wonderful stuff, talked to some great people. So let's wrap up with a gentleman by the name of Robbie Roberts. Tell us about Robbie.
Well, Robbie Roberts is the guy who does the day-to-day work there at the Frank Brownell Museum of the Southwest. And he is such a treasure trove of knowledge, both on firearms and on the history of the Southwest, and does a beautiful job with that museum in Raton, New Mexico at the Whittington Center. And for this final episode, a couple of my favorite pieces there.
I saw some of the footage. These are really cool.
Great history here. I'll let Robbie tell you the story, but it's a father and son guns that, boy, you got the history of New Mexico right there in your hand.
Take a look.
This museum is such a great repository of history and telling certainly the story of the firearm in America, but especially in the Southwest.
Yes, it is. And that was the goal of the museum when we first opened it up, was to tell the history of the Southwest, particularly this part of New Mexico, through the firearms and the accoutrements, and some of the material that made history back in those days.
Well, I got to tell you, one of my favorite parts of this museum is a couple of exhibit cases you have here that tell the story not only of guns, but of a family that is tied so closely to the history of this era and the Old West. And you're very, very fortunate to have here some of their guns and some of their other personal artifacts that just tell an incredible story.
Yeah, it's the story of the Lambert family, and it began when Henry Lambert migrated to this country in the early 1850s, and he was from France, so he came over from France, and he was a chef by trade.
Okay,
French chef. A French chef, believe it or not.
Who else would wind up in New Mexico?
Well, it's a kind of little story how he got out here, but he wound up working in the White House and was a chef for President Lincoln.
Oh my gosh.
During the Civil War.
Okay.
As the war was beginning to wind down in about 1864, early 1865, General Grant, who happened to know Henry, kind of suggested that maybe he would like to go west, young man, go west, and to maybe open up a restaurant or something out here in the West. Yeah. So Henry gathered up his first wife, and they moved, and they actually showed up at Elizabethtown, New Mexico. Oh, happy dog. And it was a gold mining town. Yeah. And as soon as they got there, got their restaurant open, there was a restaurant bar.
Okay.
The gold disappeared and the town closed up.
Oh no! Well, that happened a lot in the West.
Yes, it did.
With the cattle towns and with the mining towns, the vein would run out, or the railhead would move, or you'd have problems with the range for the cattle drivers, and these boom towns would spring up and disappear.
And just disappear overnight almost.
Yeah.
Well, there was a gentleman that owned most of this land around here. His name was Lucian Maxwell. Okay. And he got a hold of Henry when Elizabethtown folded and said, hey, come to Cimarron, New Mexico, and open up a place over there. And he did, and it's called the St. James Hotel. World famous. It's the only place along the Santa Fe Trail where you could eat French cuisine while you're on the Santa Fe Trail. And like in those days, it was a very wild place.
Yeah.
There was 26 reported shootings at the St. James through its history. And by the way, the St. James is still open today.
I'll be down.
But this revolver that I'm holding here, Henry, it's an 1860 Army Colt, and he brought it with him from out east, and he always kept it behind the bar. Well, they had a gentleman in the bar that night that was getting a little rowdy, and his name was it was a Garcia. I want to say James Garcia. Okay. He got pretty rowdy, so Henry was coming out of the bar, or coming out of the kitchen, seeing he was getting rowdy, grabbed this pistol from under the bar, and he never shot him. Yeah. He cold-cocked him with it.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the gentleman, when he fell head first into a big stone fireplace, and he died.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So that's the history on this pistol right here.
So that's the Old West six-gun from the French chef.
Yes. Yes.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
The story of that family doesn't end there, though.
No, it doesn't. Henry went on, and he opened and ran the St. James for years. And he had a family, started a family at the St. James, and his son Fred was born at the St. James.
When was Fred born?
He was born in 1887 in
Okay.
room 7 at the St. James Hotel.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, and he went on to be, he got involved in law enforcement at a very young age of 13 years old. And he just naturally fell into the law enforcement world. And he was the law in Colfax County for many, many years.
And that includes Cimarron? Was that?
Yes,
Oh.
yes it does. And
That was, during that era, the turn of the century era, this was still a pretty wild
pretty
place.
rough town. And what Fred oversaw from the law enforcement aspect was the transition from the Wild West
Yeah.
to the calmer days of the early 1900s.
Wow.
So he actually saw that transition, and but he was well respected
Yeah.
and well feared
Yeah.
by the bad guys, and there were still some bad guys.
Oh,
around.
yeah, yeah. New Mexico, that area?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And he was also one of the very first members of the New Mexico Mounted Patrol that the governor created to help control some of the violence that was going on in New Mexico.
Well, you have a wonderful case here with his artifacts in it. I came in here and I saw this gun. Tell me about this rifle.
That rifle is obviously a very well-used Winchester Model 94. It's chambered in 25-35, and that gun went everywhere Fred Lambert went.
This is a working gun.
Yes, it is.
The handle is taped. I'm pretty sure that's split under
Yes,
there,
it
don't
is.
you think?
Oh, yeah.
He's got the tack decorations, USA in it. Is it painted? Did he paint it?
Yeah, I'm sure he did at some point in time.
Sure.
yes.
He absolutely did. Saddle ring carbine.
Yep.
The classic 1894. Late 1890s on in through a lot of the 20th century. This
20th
was
century.
America's deer rifle, but this was so heavily used by law enforcement in the American West.
Yes, it was.
Not just him, very popular with the Texas Rangers well into the 20th century,
Yes.
well into the mid 20th century.
Absolutely.
An iconic American rifle.
And that is definitely a working rifle. And like I said, he never went anywhere without that rifle.
And you've got a great collection of the accoutrements from the entire family.
Yes. Yeah, it's something that we're very proud of. And it's our local history.
You got Mom represented over there.
Oh, absolutely. Henry did remarry, and his second wife's name was second wife's name was Mary.
Okay.
And of course, his first wife's name was Mary.
That's handy. He didn't have to
Didn't have to change any monograms or anything. But she was a very strong woman, as most women were in those days. And she kind of ran the household.
Yeah.
Even though you would never get Henry or Fred to admit it, but
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you got great history of the American West here. Actually, we've got it at all three of the NRA museums, the Frank Brownell Museum of the Southwest here, some great Old West material at the NRA National Sporting Arms Museum at Bass Pro Shops in Springfield, Missouri, and of course the old original wonderful museum, the NRA National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia. All three of those museums are open every day of the week. Admission is always free. And if people can't get by one of the museums or they can't wait to get by, a lot of the guns are on the website at nramuseums.com. Thanks for having us out here, and thanks for this beautiful museum.
Absolutely. Love to have you. Love having you out here, Jim.
Cool.